There we go.
All right. Welcome to the April 27th, 2026 meeting of the Arlington's Transportation Future Advisory Group. This meeting is open to the public and time for public comment will be reserved for the end of the meeting. During the main portion of the meeting, conversation is limited to members of the advisory group as well as staff and consultants who are supporting the advisory group. All meeting participants, please keep your devices muted until you're called upon by the chair. If you lose internet connectivity during the meeting, don't hesitate to reconnect via phone. The Microsoft Teams chat is there for two purposes. One, for his advisory group members who need technical assistance, and second, for members of the public to add their name to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who are planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting. The chat is not that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. If advisory group members wish to be recognized to speak during the course of the meeting, just raise your virtual hand in Teams and then wait to be called upon. I am not seeing anyone in the list here by phone currently, so we don't have to worry about that. And then for members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you'll be called on to speak at the end of the meeting. You'll be allotted 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat. You'll be added to the speaker list. And finally, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. All right. With that said, let's get to introductions. I know we've got some different folks here tonight than people might know. Do we want to start with staff and the consultant team?
Yeah, we normally go last, but we can start off first as a
only
change.
Because I always forget to call on you first.
Okay. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kristen Calkins. I am the project manager for Arlington's Transportation Future, and I am joined with a robust team. Let's do Brian, Allison, and then Kate, and then our consultant team.
Hey, good evening, y'all. My name is Brian Shelton. I'm an active transportation planner and deputy project manager.
Hi, everyone. Allison Bullock. I'm the transportation planning manager.
And I'm Erin Potter. I'm the lead public engagement specialist with this effort, along with
Nate Graham, public engagement for transportation projects and in support.
And good evening, everyone. My name is David Samba. I'm the consultant team project manager.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kyla Dessa and also part of the consultant team.
All right, now we'll move into the advisory group members. I'm Chris Slatt. I'm the chair of this group. Do we have anyone tonight from Arlington Neighborhoods Advisory Committee? Not seeing anyone. Bicycle Advisory Committee. Dana, you want to introduce yourself? Oh, I see you come off. Oh, there we go. Now I can hear you.
Yeah. Dana Bresch, alternate member of the BAC.
Welcome, Dana. C2E2.
Good evening. My name is Liliana Diaz, and I'm the representative of C2E2.
Commission on Aging.
I'm Peggy Jones, Commission on Aging.
Welcome, Peggy.
Part of the Transportation Committee.
Awesome. Disability Advisory Commission.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Prio representing the DAC.
Welcome, Elizabeth. Economic Development Commission. Not seeing anybody tonight. Fiscal Affairs Advisory. Not seeing anyone there. Forestry Natural Resources Commission.
John Kerry here.
Good to have you, John. Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission.
Aaron Schutz, Neighborhood Complete Streets, and golly, I'd rather be outside right now. It's so beautiful out.
I am very much enjoying my screen porch today.
This is.
All right. Parks and Recreation Commission.
Good evening, everyone. Daniel Garay with the Parks and Rec Commission.
Welcome, Daniel. Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Pamela Van Hine, Pedestrian Advisory Committee. You can hear me okay?
Absolutely, Pam.
Oh, good. It's not my computer.
Planning Commission.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Striner, and I'm representing the Planning Commission tonight.
Good to have you, Tony. Transit Advisory Committee. And how about Transportation Commission? Oh, all right. Well, welcome everyone. What's next on the agenda? Yes, draft strategies and progress tracking metrics. Take it away.
So just a reminder that we have done a lot of work as a team. So far, we've made it through a board endorsed vision and goals. We went through phase 3 engagement where we received community feedback on the draft policies. We've done a lot of edits and revisions to them, and then a few more tweaks even with what we shared with you on Thursday. And we have developed our first kind of pass at the draft strategies. Those were developed through a lot of input. What we heard through the 3 phases of community engagement, when people would tell us things, it would be like, we love that, that's not a goal, or we love that, that's not a policy, that's a strategy. We took notes of everything we were hearing so that we could integrate it when we created the draft strategies. We got every committee and commission's kind of top 2 perspectives and thoughts on the policies through last time's assignment. We used those. We integrated a lot of the intentions and thoughts that were in those. We went through the current MTP to help kind of understand what is in the MTP that we want to continue to carry forward to make sure that we have that guidance in place as we continue to build out and implement kind of the vision and goals for this plan. We looked at peer cities to see what they have, and then we worked with people within the Department of Transportation or Division of Transportation that aren't necessarily like on this planning kind of team per se, but have a lot of thoughts about how we need to make sure the transportation guidance works so they can continue to do their jobs. And then also we worked with other departments within the county to make sure that all of our strategies are relating across departments so that we work alongside in step with the other comprehensive plan elements that exist to date. That's the high level spiel I'm going to give. We shared all of the information with you guys in advance, and I'm going to turn it back over to Chris to facilitate a little bit of a conversation about the draft strategies.
All right. So we just want to hear, you got to read ahead of the draft strategies. You're going to have lots of time coming up in the future for your whole committee or commission to weigh in on them. But we're looking right now for just this quick reacts. What specific draft strategies resonate with you? What questions do you have about the draft strategies? And if Liliana has feedback, I want to go to her first because I know she's got another meeting she's trying to participate in at the same time.
Yeah, hi, Chris. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak early. So I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to comment on Policy M, which is the policy that explicitly commits the county to achieve carbon neutrality within the MTP plan. It's a major win for the C2E2 Commission because we advocated strongly for this, and we're very grateful that it is included. So thank you so much for the county staff for listening to us. But the policies don't really reduce emissions, and we think that implementation is key. And I want to highlight 3 strategies gaps that need to be addressed with respect to Policy M. The first one is embodied carbon. We think that the current strategies address emissions from vehicles in use, but they do not account for emissions from construction itself. And we are in the future going to build roads and bridges and major bike lanes, and all that material and that construction has a substantial carbon footprint. And those emissions are real, they are significant, and they are near term. And so we respectfully suggest that Policy M is revised or a strategy is included to require the life cycle greenhouse gas analysis for major infrastructure projects and to prioritize lower carbon materials. The second gap that we looked at and identified is on EV charging equity, particularly the equity part. We're very happy that Strategy 6 identifies a space for EV charging, but we think that it lacks equity language, and that is extremely important because residents with garages can charge at home, but residents that have to do it without the possibility of charging at home because they are renters or they are low income households, they will depend on public infrastructure. And so we really think that it is important to bring that equity consideration into this. And so we suggest that we could revise Strategy 6 to add language as it follows: ensuring equitable distribution and access for residents without strict parking. And I can send that language to Christine later so that it is clear. And the third gap that we looked at is climate metrics, because we want to be accountable. We have a goal to reduce emissions. We have good policies and good strategies, but we need to make sure that we embed accountability within our strategies. And so for policy V as in victory, that commits to tracking progress, we don't see that it does explicitly identify climate goals as a metric to be tracked. And policy M commits to carbon neutrality, but as I said, we need accountability. So we suggest that we could revise policy V strategy 1 to add language as it follows: including specific metrics, tracking progress towards carbon neutrality and equity goals. So all these suggestions, what we're trying to do is to strengthen policy M without changing its direction. We want to address real emissions and ensure that we have an equity lens. We want to create accountability, and we really want to ensure feasibility of the long-term plan for transportation for Arlington. Thank you very much.
Chris, do you mind just quickly? Because I want to address the last one. So
Yeah, go for it.
The strategies aren't where we're identifying metrics. That's actually going to be the second section that we're talking about this evening in the presentation, is where we're going to share the progress tracking metrics that we have for the first time. And we do have one relating to kind of emissions. So that's just kind of a flag as far as where the plan itself is addressing that component of tracking.
Oh, excellent. Music to my ears. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else who has questions or strategies that they want to flag as really resonating with them, go ahead and throw your hand up. Since I don't see any up right now, I'm going to go ahead and ask my question, which is about what I would call strategy A5, integrate safety within all traffic signal operations and optimization after alter signal phasing, access permissions, and alignment of streets is appropriate to ensure safe mobility for all users. Some vehicle movements may be partially or fully restricted to support safe mobility of pedestrians, bicyclists, and other users. By access permissions, are we just talking about like turn restriction type stuff, or does this extend all the way to like modal filters and that sort of thing?
I'm gonna hand off to Allison since she was a stronger drafter of this specific strategy.
Yeah, we've left it flexible to kind of cover all of the above is our intention. So yeah, looking at things like modal filtering, where we might want to prioritize a street for bicyclists and limit through car traffic, or it, in order to make for that safer corridor for cyclists. So it could take any number of forms, but that's why we just kind of use the broader access management language.
I was hoping that was the case, but I wanted to double check. All right, Pam, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for doing this. Obviously a huge amount of work on your part, and there's a lot of really great stuff in here. Thank you very much. And a lot of great stuff that the PAC pushed for, and we really appreciate that. Some of the most important things to us that were in there, obviously not worded as we submitted it. We had way too many words for everything, so you shortened things very nicely. That it protects the clear zone and the sight lines under F. That's very important to us. I mean, we value all the things that people would like to do in the streetscape, but we want to make sure that we have room to actually walk. So it was really important to us that you put that in there. Also happy under biophilia that you supported green ribbons. You didn't use that term, you used a different term, but yeah, that's something we also really like, and that's a way of accommodating multiple types of landscaping and bike facilities and ped facilities, hopefully in one space. There are a couple places in there where you're supporting our idea of finding a different way in the future to build and maintain sidewalks. And we really appreciate that's in there. And I think that is details that we need to work out over time. I think I saw in there that you were talking about new sidewalks, starting with new sidewalks, and then maybe we'll figure out what to do with the older sidewalks. And are you specifically talking about commercially development ones or private property? I think I saw something that was private property also. And one of our problems is the current RNAC rules that actually still allow neighbors to block buildings, sidewalks that are needed. And that is something that we really like to change. In my neighborhood alone, we lost 3 projects because neighbors fought it. So I'd like to verify that. There's a couple other things that we love as well. I have a couple comments in general. A lot of under behavior, you have a duplicate. You talk about safe routes to schools and APS, and you have 2 strategies. And first, I thought they were different. Amber, our chair, looked at everything too, and he said the words are a little bit different, but I think the content is exactly the same. So you probably just want to use the second one. Some of the strategies overall are kind of aspirational. They're not really not specific or concrete, and we'd like to see them more concrete. Anytime that you use the word explore or investigate, we would like you to actually change that to actually doing something. We don't want you to just explore or investigate. We want some of these things fixed. So those are our primary comments, and thank you. Amber and I already have like pages of comments to send you, and we look forward to sharing them with our committee next week and getting back to you with more detail. But thank you so much.
Kristen, do you want to respond to any of that, or should I just move to the next person?
So I think the only question I have is Pam's question about sidewalks and new sidewalks. Is that relative to construction or how they're constructed, how they're repaired? We did include kind of a nod to the fact that we want sidewalks built with concrete now moving forward and no longer using street pavers, just because those have both operational and a lot of safety challenges for our duality of like staff and residents. So that's kind of where that guidance is. And then in general, we can talk about it more when we talk about typologies. But we have guidance kind of on sidewalks at all there that we can get into as well.
Oh, really? John, go ahead. You're next.
Great. Thanks, Chris. This is great. We've been very consistent in pushing for things around green infrastructure and reallocating the right of way. And so we're very happy to see a number of things in here, and I'll just be very brief. Of course, under N, conserving and expanding the tree canopy is huge. Continuous green corridors is great. Bioretention systems and other green infrastructure is something we really appreciate. And then in addition, there are a number of things that we hope will be implemented, and that includes congestion pricing, steps to reduce personal vehicle trips, and a number of other things. So just very briefly, this seems great, and we just hope that these strategies can be implemented. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Tony, you're up next.
Okay, you know how excited I was when I was reading through these over the weekend? Just that warmed my heart. I love them. I, I do have comments I want to add. I think in policy A, I think there's a bit on data-driven analysis, but I think that could be stronger to reference particular corridors. You know, as in like you study collision data and identify the corridors with the highest number of injuries and use that to sort of prioritize um, safety investments. That's one. Um, I loved in particular the ones on removing barriers to transit, as well as the sort of land use focused topics and the people centric goals. You've heard me say that many times over the last several months we've been meeting, and so I'm happy that that's in there. I think under policy J, I think adding aspects of a trail study in addition to the sidewalk study. I know there was sort of a CPI study, but I think that having a trail component that matches the sort of condition assessments for the sidewalks would be great too. The policy R, in terms of getting a specific long-term funding model, I think the creation of a Vision Zero specific capital project that would work specifically on sort of pedestrian and bicycle improvements that would be around the county. I'm not sure if such a project exists already, but I in my past work, I found it to be an effective way of implementing some of the quicker build projects that are talked about in other areas of this plan. And then something else I've been saying under policy S and V, I think adding some sort of elements or strategies that would allow for this plan to be amended administratively. It's sort of like you can change the strategies as long as they are still in line with the policies that were agreed upon by the public process here. And I think that particularly has some applications with technology focused ones. I think that was policy B. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but as technology evolves and changes, it will giving staff that flexibility to be able to change some of the terminology, say, around certain new technologies without having to go through a massive public process, I think would save us a lot of time, and it would give more flexibility to this plan because this is a more long-term initiative. And I think allowing that ability to change things, not quite on the fly, but in a structured time every few years would allow for that. Anyway, so that's all I had to say. But like I said, this was phenomenal. I really, really, really enjoyed reading these, and this made me very happy to read over the weekend.
Chris, I'm just gonna follow up really quick because Tony, we heard you, and we also like the idea of being able to do administrative changes like that. There's intentionally not a strategy, but there's narrative within the document itself that talks to kind of the need to update the plan. Unfortunately, you can't just make administrative changes. Everything does need to go through the public process if it's changing portions of this. So that's why there's not an explicit strategy in there, is because we were told that that's not something that is reasonable for us to include as a strategy at this time. But the intent is there in the larger plan document, and you'll find it.
Perfect. All right, great. Thanks.
Awesome. Dana, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, on policy J, a couple things. The discussion of encroachments, you need to specifically discuss how to do that because the county doesn't do that particularly well right now. To include sidewalk blockages, people block sidewalks with impunity. Also explicitly address the expectations and enforcement of maintenance of sidewalks and commercial spaces, because, again, that's a problem. Then on policy or E, echo, enforcement. I can't beat the drum hard, too hard on enforcement. Enforcement has to be part of everything that we do. It's not once, 1 week every 6 months as a blitz. It's effective enforcement strategies on an ongoing basis. Because without enforcement, various road users will just do what they want because they'll know they can. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Aaron, you're next.
Sure. Sure. Thanks. There is a lot of good stuff. I don't think I quite had Tony's enthusiasm when I was reading it this weekend, but maybe I'm just more jaded. But there's a lot of good stuff in here. I'm excited to see the next part of the show where we do talk about measuring things, but I kind of shared Tony's interest in data-driven and Pam's comment about less aspirational, more concrete. Um, I feel like so many of these things should just be laid out, maybe not exact percentages, but something that's then when we get to the metrics, they mesh together a lot tighter. But um, the let's see. If I'm going backwards through this, the curb stuff, there's a little confusion for me, at least in the first, the intro paragraph. It says different modes of travel, but curb lane usage is sometimes for trash cans. And that's where sometimes conflict happens, at least on my route to work. So that's not really traveling. The trash cans aren't about conflicts in travel. But I love the idea of pursuing automated enforcement on that. Backing up to S, the technology stuff. I'd love to see some examples in there, maybe in the sidebar. And I know that keeps changing. This is a long-term plan. But as a teacher, where Arlington gives every kid a screen and test scores keep going down, I know that technology doesn't fix all things. I'm still very bullish about it. And I also think we should look at the other side of technology, which is the cars that residents buy, the delivery robots we're starting up in Arlington now. We need to plan for what they're doing, not just what you guys are doing with fancy technologies to help us get around. But my car will talk to another car to help both of us move better in a few years. So I think we need both sides of that. The MOT one, policy L. I think you guys have started doing this, but I just want to make sure it's very explicit in there that something like a unique QR code so that it's very quick and easy for residents to comment, note problems on every single site, anywhere where there's an MOT going on with construction or whatever. I really appreciate seeing a couple of things like in policy J, recognizing that maintenance needs will continue to grow as bike lanes are different than travel lanes in terms of how you sweep them and maintain them, and hopefully a little bit better about keeping the bumps down on those things. Permanent treatment, durable treatments. We know those are important. Last bit, if I go up to the sidewalk thing, going back to what Pam was saying, I really loved seeing that working on updating the county code for easements and sidewalks and all developments. Part of the NCSC stuff is a real hassle for us to have to deal with. There's so much complexity in that thing, and to have that be something that Arlington is looking at, I'm very excited for that. Going up to policy A and B, again, I love seeing that vehicle movements might be partially or fully restricted to support safe mobility. Arlington Transportation has for a long time not wanted to think about closing roads or restricting through traffic or something. So at least now I think there's a possibility that we can have ways to have a little bit of that. But I'm still a little unclear on that policy B, strategy 2, I think, with pedestrians first. Wait and see will be my approach to that. I'm just not positive that it's we're gonna get rid of the status quo of car dominance and get to a place like Amsterdam where cars have a hard time getting around because they've made it so compellingly easy for other modes. So I'm hopeful. But thanks. There's a lot of good stuff in here.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Dana, did you have something else to weigh in on?
Actually, no, I just forgot to drop my hand.
No worries. I wasn't sure if it went back up or if it was still up. Cool. I have two quick questions then. So we have an existing strategy in the current bike element around updating the zoning ordinance to require bike parking and by right development. Um, I'm interested in that moving forward, and I was wondering if staff feel like that's already captured in something in this draft, or what the right policy would be to put it under if not.
So that would be an action, not a strategy. So that would be
Ah,
something that would be like a discrete thing that these are like ongoing action, ongoing kind of approaches to how we do our work. A discrete thing is an action, and there's not going to be dozens that come out of this plan. There's probably going to be 10 that are like critical to how we implement the plan. I might ask Allison to follow up on this because she is more involved in the zoning at all than I am. This is more about the surface transportation and not specifically what we make buildings do. And we are trying to not cross that path because we don't want that happening to us for other things. So it may not be something that we think is the intention of this plan, as that is not really the surface transportation guidance. That is really something that we want to see happen in other buildings, but that is not part of how we plan our right of way. So it's
okay. I feel like
figure it out.
we've bled into that other realm a bit already in this draft between studying eliminating parking requirements in metro rail and premium transit corridors and updating the county code to require all private and public property development projects to provide easements for the construction of sidewalks and their frontages.
How
Okay.
far? Yeah, no, it's fair.
Yeah,
That's
and that's another one we can take a second look at. We have a couple strategies in there that are meant to be a little more of a catch-all for the many items that we'd like to review the code for and also pursue greater authority for via state legislation. So we have language about essentially lobbying for additional state legislation and authority for items like this. And then we're planning to have an action that would be kind of a little bit of a catch-all in terms of just reviewing the county code and looking for places to better align it with this new guidance. And so that could cover a whole umbrella of things. But your point's noted, Chris, that I think bike parking is one we can just do a double check that we are covering adequately in the plan.
And then
Sounds
two other kind of places where you might see guidance that alludes to that that's not an explicit strategy is we are also creating modal strategies under the networks that we're still drafting. These were the strategies that support the policies, but we're also creating some modally specific strategies relating to implementing the priority networks. So there could be something that you could see there as it's developed. And then we also have a separate section that's really pulled together a lot of pieces that existed in the current MTP and then a little bit of the flavor of the intent of this plan and created a separate section within the plan that will be part of the full draft plan where we talk about development and the expectations that we have for transportation and development. So that's another opportunity to kind of see where we like expand on bike parking a little bit.
Sounds great. I see Pam's got her hand up now.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how this was going to work, so we literally have comments on all kinds of things. We have a bunch of questions on policy E. As I mentioned before, 4 and 5 seem to be duplicates. They're worded differently, but they're basically the same thing. And 6 and 7 also might be duplicates. I'm not sure that they're very different. And if they are different, it's interesting that you have two strategies about bikes. And I didn't see anything here specifically about drivers or pedestrians, and I think it'd be good to add those. You also talk about younger people, but you don't specifically mention older folk, and older folk have specific educational needs as well. And something that we think is important, I'm not sure if it fits here or somewhere else, if there is infrastructure that can't really be fixed to make it safe, recommending instead that you lower the speeds. And I don't know where that goes, but we'd like to see that somewhere. So anyway, thank you.
Great. Let's see. It looks like we got a couple minutes left. If anybody else has other thoughts, go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm just going to highlight strategies that resonated with me in the remaining minutes, which I am extremely partial to A5. That's the one I asked the question about earlier that includes access permissions. I'm really excited to see something about that in there. B3 about using the guidance on modal priority networks and hierarchies, plan and design streets. I'm particularly partial to the sentence about reallocating existing right-of-way as needed to hit that guidance. B7 is near and dear to my heart about coordinating signals and reorienting stop signs to prioritize pedestrians and people taking transit or riding bikes and scooters. D5 specifically, not just increasing the frequency of bus routes to accommodate transit demand, but also to potentially stimulate transit demand of that piece in there. I'm partial to D6. That's about, requiring sidewalks from all new development. D7, studying eliminating parking requirements and establishing maximum parking requirements. I got a couple more, but I see someone else has their hand up, so I'll stop using up time and go ahead and I don't recognize the username, but go ahead.
Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Hi, Elizabeth with the Disability Advisory Commission. I just wanted to say I noticed in several parts where you had specifically talked about people using micromobility, and I'm assuming that's including electric wheelchairs, and you do say rolling in a couple of places. We appreciated that. We really appreciate that you highlighted the need to maintain paratransit and other things. So with great accolades, I'd like to mention three things that I'd hope that you can make a little clearer. One, when you talk about safety, pedestrian safety, please include that accessible routes need to be maintained during maintenance of roads. I know it's a comment we made. I know it's a comment that the Pedestrian Advisory Committee made, but I didn't see anything specific in there that says that this has been a huge problem. And so it needs to be called out specifically, I hope. And also with the statement that you want to have, pedestrian only streets and other pedestrian friendly areas. We all love that. And I've even on this call, people have highlighted it. I would also like to have a statement in there that considers to continue the need for accessible transportation near those areas. I mean, the need for accessible parking near those areas. I know that's something that we had discussed, that some people with disabilities and others, seniors, will need to park, and that in those areas that are specifically pedestrian only, to highlight the need for accessible disability parking spaces near those areas. And well, unnecessary, because I think it's stated that you want to make sure things are accessible for people with disabilities throughout. We do want to again highlight that in the section on biofuels, that it is designed to not impede the ability of people with mobility needs to access the push buttons, because it's so often that they say, oh, let's put this nice garden around the push button area, and it becomes very hard to reach. So those are three major things we just wanted to point out that we would specifically like mentioned if possible.
And I'll piggyback on that to just say I think L1 could really use some specific language around accessibility for all. It's the policy about updating our maintenance of transportation plans for during construction activities. And it just seems to be even when there is a way for pedestrians to continue to get through a site during construction, often it's not an accessible one. I just walked through a purpose-built extra pedestrian area on 9th Street yesterday that included going down a curb. I feel might be worth specifically calling out there. Anybody else for the good of the order? All right, then I think we can move on to the next item in the agenda. Are we going to Brian now? Is that my recollection? All right.
Okay. Progress tracking metrics. All right. So it is important that we track our progress over time to understand whether our strategies are actually moving the county towards achieving its transportation-related goals. We will use a combination of progress measures and progress indicators to do just that. Our progress measures are what we did. They are specific, they're measurable, they're quantifiable, and they will be based on the data that we have available to us today. They focus on our actions and outputs, those things that are directly within our control, that is DES. These measures answer the questions: are we implementing what we said we would do? We also have performance indicators. These are what happened as a result of the work we did. Progress indicators look at the broader outcomes and trends across the county and reflect whether conditions are moving in the desired direction. Both progress measures and indicators will be shared with the community every 5 years. Many outcomes we are tracking, such as safety, access, and travel behavior, require multiple years to show meaningful change. And this also just allows staff to spend more time on the implementation of the transportation plan rather than working on the report out. For both measures and indicators, the county will establish a baseline. The baseline reflects where we are today, and it gives us a consistent reference point for measuring future change. Measures are strictly for reporting purposes. We do not have explicit targets or specific goals that we want to achieve, only that the strategies are moving the needle, again, in that direction that we're hoping to go in. We will be using the county's the CVIM tool, the Community Vulnerable Index Mapping tool, for measures and indicators that can be mapped to ensure that the outcomes and investments align with the intention of the strategies, the goals, and the vision of the transportation plan for a more equitable transportation future. Performance measures and indicators will track the progress of the county's commitments to safety, reduction in vehicle miles traveled, implementation of remote priority networks, maintenance, greenhouse gas emissions, affordability, and user satisfaction. Safety, again, continues to be a top priority in the county. Our first two indicators reflect a Vision Zero aligned outcome. The goal is to eliminate traffic-related deaths and serious injuries by 2030, and to not only hit that target by 2030, but to maintain zero deaths and serious injuries beyond 2030. The indicators set a clear outcome-based target rather than focusing on the individual projects or treatments. To understand whether we're making meaningful progress towards that goal, we also track additional safety trends. This includes changes in crash frequency and severity and how crashes affect different modes and users. Looking at these trends, it helps us to understand whether safety improvements are effective for our different types of roadway users, but then also within the entire network and not just a couple of the corridors. We're also going to monitor travel speeds on arterials and collectors because speed is one of the strongest predictors of crash severity. Tracking speeds helps us assess whether changes to street design and classification are supporting safer operating conditions, again, for all users. Next are our travel choice indicators. They track shifts in behavior due to county investment in safe and all ages and abilities and accessible multimodal infrastructure, improved transit operations, as well as effective TDM strategies. These indicators will help us understand whether investments are supporting mode shift and also reducing automobile dependence. This slide will focus on how we measure progress towards completing the modal priority networks and ensuring they provide access for residents to get them to where they need to or want to go. These are implementation and access focused measures. Important to note that distance matters when measuring access to the modal priority networks. As part of the process of refreshing the transportation plan, we looked at how our peer jurisdictions define access and saw a consistent theme that the further someone has to travel to reach the network, the less likely they are to use it. So for the bicycle and micromobility, access is measured with 1/8 of a mile, or roughly two blocks. This reflects the research and experience showing that comfort and convenience are especially important for encouraging use of all ages and abilities facilities. And for transit, access is measured within 1/4 mile, which generally corresponds to a 5 or to like a 7-minute walk. This distance aligns with how people typically access bus stops and stations for their everyday trips. Here we have additional measures for the bicycle and micromobility network and transit network. Again, distance matters when it comes to bike share use as well. Basically, bike share stations need to be very close to where people live and work, just in order to be useful. Again, access is measured with 1/8 of a mile, or about 2 blocks. Beyond that distance, I think that people are much less likely to make the extra effort to reach a station. We've also included distance to jobs, think like office jobs, commercial, hospitality jobs. This ensures that we're capturing both trip origin and destination, and these metrics will help show whether bike share expansion is improving everyday access to the places where people want to and need to travel to. For transit, access alone is not enough. We're also proposing progress tracking metrics for service quality and also time competitiveness. These are two of the most important factors influencing ridership. On-time performance reflects the day-to-day user experience and system dependability, and time competitiveness allows us to compare transit to driving in a realistic corridor-based way. If transit takes longer than driving, people are less likely to choose it. We want to show our progress towards achieving that. Measures for maintenance and state of good repair focus on whether the county's transportation assets are being maintained at an acceptable and reliable standard. We are carrying forward some of the existing condition-based metrics used by Department of Parks and also our water, sewer, streets to ensure that the county stays proactive when it comes to maintenance and asset management. The environmental metrics connect transportation planning to existing stormwater management and climate commitments that the county has made to reduce the acres of impervious surface area and also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions derived from transportation to a rate of 0.5 metric ton of CO2 per person per year, and that's by 2050. We've also included the 2030 and the 2040 years as well. As kind of our pathway to reaching that target. Both these tracking metrics help indicate and measure whether transportation policies and investments are aligning with our long-range emissions reduction targets. And so this slide reflects outcomes that are experienced directly by the residents rather than infrastructure or system performance alone. Our affordability indicator frames transportation as kind of a cost burden. For some people, the cost of owning a car insurance, gasoline, property tax can be a significant expense and represents a large household expense, especially for our lower income residents and families. While the county cannot directly reduce the cost of the expenses, we can provide better, more affordable transportation options which reduce car dependency and car ownership. Again, because there are many factors outside of the control of DES, it's tracked as an indicator. Then we also have our satisfaction indicator. Satisfaction captures the public perception and experience of the transportation system, and the transportation satisfaction questions can be modified in the existing county-wide survey, and again, we can update that every couple of years.
All right, folks. If you have questions on the indicators and measures that we've just gone over, now would be a great time to get those answered. Elizabeth, is your hand up fresh or is that still from earlier?
It's fresh. Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Just two quick questions. First, what is the Community Vulnerability Index? And second, I noticed that there's no mention of STAR here. I don't know whether that's because you guys keep it completely separate, but because it is the future transportation plan, if you could mention STAR in your metrics, that would be great. I noticed you talk about art and if you could just put STAR in there. I know our Disability Advisory Commission just met with all the STAR folks and they talked a lot about their metrics. So if one of you could talk about whether it's coordinated with that, that would be appreciated.
I'll answer the first question and then pass off the STAR question to the team. The Community Vulnerability Index map, it's a geographic layer. It is hosted on the Arlington County website, and it identifies concentrations of Arlington's vulnerable populations. We can apply it as a base layer in our analysis of other data points within the county. And it provides an index at the census tract level and identifies relative concentrations of vulnerable populations in relation to other census tracts.
Cool, and you can access it on Arlington County Parks
Yeah.
and Rec.
I can, I'll drop the link in the chat for everyone to take a look at it. Let me pull it up real quick.
Thanks.
And then they use several different variables to determine vulnerability. So right now it's persons of color, persons under the age of 18, persons over the age of 65, lower income households, low income persons, low educational attainment, and then persons born outside the United States. So let me get that into the chat.
Brian, I've got it up if you don't want to chase it down.
I got it right here. Thanks, Brian.
Sure, you've got it too.
And the question about whether you guys are integrating with STAR, because they have a lot of metrics they need to be developing. And we just talked to them last week and they said they were doing so. So what is the coordination between this and the Transportation Futures Plan?
Allison, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure, I can take that. Yeah, so we have for both STAR and for ART, just for the fixed route service, they do have more detailed metrics. Basically, all of the operations within the county have those more detailed metrics for their service. We're not copying all of those for the purpose of just simply not being duplicative. So those will continue to be reported by STAR. Our plan won't affect those in any way. But we don't have a measure in here specifically for STAR. But they are coordinated.
Would it be possible to add the word STAR where you've specifically mentioned art, at least in your in these? I mean, it would just be great to have one mention of STAR under the metrics section.
Yeah. Yeah, we can take another look at that.
Thanks.
Dana, you're up next.
Okay, on the state of good repair, the rapid repair of infrastructure. Is there any way we can avoid, when we have, unforecasted damage, that we can avoid going into the capital improvement plan process and having repairs take 2 years, particularly for non-vehicular infrastructure?
And that one.
You know, whether that's self-insurance, some kind of acceleration of the projects, you know, whatever it is, you know, but, you know, if we lost a bridge, a vehicle bridge, you know, we'd repair it quickly. If we lose a pedestrian or bike bridge, you know, it gets repaired, you know, when its time comes. Thank you.
Listen, do you want to answer that one or?
Yeah, and Dana, I'm sorry if you can just repeat. I was taking notes, so I missed the first half of your question.
Okay. Yeah, basically, you know, how can we, you know, can we include some kind of prioritization for unprogrammed damage, whether it's deterioration or whether it's you know, storm or natural hazards damage for non-vehicular infrastructure, you know, so it doesn't just get thrown back into the capital improvement plan or some process like that. You know, we shouldn't have to wait, you know, we shouldn't have to wait 2 years, you know, to start a project, you know, for a couple $100,000.
Yeah, okay. So basically like a target replacement duration is
Well, or a self-insurance pool, and you just say, you know, this wasn't forecast at all, and now we have to do it. You know, the same as you would a fire in a school. You know, we don't have a budget, you know, to do fire repair in a school, but we figure out how to do fire repair in a school or in a county building. You know, we suck it up.
Yeah, we'll have to take a closer look at that one. This may fall more within the public spaces master plan realm, but we can look at that and see between the parks plan and this plan where something like that might be appropriate.
Thank you.
All right, not seeing any other hands, so I think we can move on.
It's my turn again. So I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of how we got to the kind of refreshed street typology framework we have. Just as a reminder from our last meeting, we have a new roadway classification system that has limited access facilities, arterials, collectors, and locals. So those are the framework that we are developing the street types from. We currently have 6 street types within the transportation plan for arterials and 4 for locals. Those are much more robust for our arterials and assigned in a much more robust way. For the locals, there's kind of a smattering of a few areas where we have urban center locals that speak a little bit more to places where we have more dense development and the type of sidewalks that exist there. There's some locations within Roslyn that have kind of pedestrian ways identified, but there's not a robust conversation about the varying types of local streets that exist. Local streets kind of aren't a one size fits all. A local street in Clarendon is not a local street in Dominion Hills. They have very different kind of contexts around them. And we think it's important that we create these types, not just for our arterials and collectors, but also for our locals to recognize where they're having more activity from a transportation mobility perspective. Just as a little reminder, these are the 6 types that exist today for the arterials. They go from kind of our primary mixed use, highest density types down to kind of the low density residential types and a little bit of in between. We've found that having 6 different types applied across the county can get kind of messy when it comes to the frequency with which they change in response to the land use types that are around them. So Washington Boulevard is an example we like to point out. This is just the segment from Clarendon to Route 50. On this map, you can see that the typology changes 5 times. On Glebe, from Glebe to 50 on Washington Boulevard under the current typology, we have 8 times the corridor changes, which means 8 times the sidewalk guidance changes, 8 times the guidance for kind of the buffer and amenity zone changes. And that's just a lot of kind of fluctuation within kind of the pedestrian way and the expectations people have for as wide as these sidewalks are going to be. We've developed new typologies, and in those, we have 4 changes along Glebe as opposed to the 8 that exist today. So a little bit more consistency in the pedestrian experience, in the user experience, and how the road feels as you move along it. These street types are what we're looking to. So the classifications are kind of a recognition of how these streets move people and just their mobility function today. Our street types represent what we want them to look like, the amenities that we want them to have, especially from the curb lane to the building or property line. This is really about that pedestrian area that we're thinking about. It guides the streetscape and what we do there. We want these areas to be safe, comfortable, and accessible for people who are walking, rolling, maybe slowly, appropriately scooting or biking, depending upon the street type and location along these corridors. And we want them to make sure that space works with the land use context around it, that it helps operational needs for transportation, but it's also a social and economic opportunity area for the community. As we developed these street types, we did them for each of the kind of larger classifications. Just for arterials, we're not looking at, primary and minor arterials or major and minor collectors. It's just whether or not it's an arterial. There's 3 types. For collectors, we've got a few. And in these guidance sections for the typologies, we talk about how wide the sidewalk minimum clear zone is. We don't have like the ranges. This is all about the absolute minimum that's acceptable. The landscape furniture zone, again, the minimums that are acceptable. The shy zone, so making sure that door swings or fences don't encroach into the pedestrian clear zone. We have a little space and breathing room there. And then there will also have an assigned curb lane hierarchy along with those street types. We don't have those to share today. We're just sharing the street types. We're also going to include a reference within the plan document for some areas that cafe zones exist. They're an important kind of piece of that cross section, but this plan isn't where you look for that guidance. We're going to have a cross reference to the retail plan that economic development developed. We know that sometimes we're not always going to get everything we want. This is kind of our statement of what we need. Sometimes projects will happen incrementally, but this is kind of pointing to that future that we want. A little bit of a how-to guide on how all the guidance that we've been sharing is going to come together. So today we're talking about the typologies. That's really the space that you see highlighted right here, behind the curb, the planting and amenity zone, the sidewalk, and the shy zone, the curb to the building line. But that's not the only place where you find information about how to use the guidance that we're creating. So one of the things that I'm sure a lot of people are kind of wondering, how does this all come together? How do the typologies relate to the classifications, relate to curb lane, relate to the modal priority networks? And we developed this little graphic that helps explain that the modal hierarchies are the first place you look. They guide the totality of the cross section. So from building face, property line, whatever we want to call it, that's where you start. What do we prioritize? Always pedestrians, but then is it bikes and micromobility, or is it transit, or is it maybe it's just pedestrians? We look and see, okay, if we've accommodated our modal priority networks, we look for guidance on kind of how the street functions. Is this somewhere that we really are thinking that it's important to maintain connectivity along a corridor? An arterial is a location that we're probably a lot less likely to want to filter traffic as much because that's a place where we're expecting people to have longer trips. We're going to look at the curb lane hierarchy to understand what's the priority for that space if safety's been accommodated and if we need it for the modal priority networks. If that's all taken care of, what do we prioritize in that space? And it all comes together kind of to help create this, I don't want to call it a cookie cutter or a puzzle, but it's just kind of like special sections of guidance to help create that cross section that works for transportation and works to make sure people can move along a corridor in the county under the vision and goals that we've developed. So talking about these refreshed street types. So we have 7 that we've created. We did 3 for arterials just because the arterials have a bit more change in the type of function that they play. We have 2 for our collectors and 2 for our locals. For the arterials, we have those broken down based on kind of the land use that surrounds them. So low density, those corridors tend to have residential along them. Buildings are set farther back from the street. They have slightly lower sidewalk activity, and people who do take driving trips along them tend to take longer trips or biking as well. For our medium density arterials, those transition into kind of the areas where we see transitioning commercial, medium to high residential density. These are more townhouse, garden apartment neighborhoods, lower density commercial. We see activity coming closer to the street. We have more sidewalk activity happening in these areas. And again, trips are somewhat longer because it's still an arterial. And then for our high density arterials, these are the ones that you think about as kind of the most kind of active places within the county. They're closer to our high capacity transit. They have taller 100% street facing buildings all along them. They've got a lot of sidewalk activity happening. They are kind of the sidewalks where lots of different things are happening in the county. For our collectors, our low density collectors have a very similar kind of feel to the way we identified the low density arterials. Trips are slightly shorter on our collectors just because that's kind of the role they play within the network. But you've got lower density residential, buildings are set farther back from the street. We've got lower to moderate activity. And then we have active collectors. We decided not to break them out into 3 because then it gets a lot busier because we have so many more collectors within the county than arterials. But these are places where, for varying different reasons, there's likely to be more activity happening along the street. We've got townhouses, we've got garden apartments, we have the taller buildings. These are places that we know sidewalks need to accommodate lots of different activity along them. And then for our low density locals, similar to the collectors and the arterials, these are single family home neighborhoods, residential, low street activity, homes are farther back. In these areas, your pedestrian trips tend to be a little bit shorter. Even your driving trips tend to be shorter on locals. And then we have active locals, and we've created kind of a recognition that these are places that we expect people to be walking. There's more foot traffic because there's more people that either live on them, if they're garden apartments, townhouse neighborhoods, up to our more densely populated areas. And these have kind of that recognition that the sidewalks are going to be busier places. We have minimum guidance associated with all of these types. It's not the maximum. We have an asterisk at the bottom of this table that says there are a lot of places in the county where we have sector planning guidance that goes above and beyond this. This is kind of the county-wide guidance. But we know that Crystal City and Roslyn and Ballston and Langston Boulevard and Columbia Pike all have very specific guidance to those areas that went through a community vetting process. That this doesn't say that's not the guidance anymore. This is saying this is the starting point. Don't go below it. So for our arterials, for sidewalks, that means a minimum low density arterial is 6 feet with a planting or amenity zone of 4 feet and a 1 foot shy zone. Sidewalks, both sides of the street, similar to the current plan. For medium density arterials, because they're more active, they're getting a little bit more foot traffic. We're looking for 8 foot sidewalks, 5 foot amenity and planting zones, 2 foot shy zones to allow for a little bit more give with wider doors. For our high density arterials, a minimum 10 foot sidewalk. If you look in some of our sector plans, that's going to be wider for some of these because they have a lot of density on them. But we're saying that the absolute minimum is 10 feet. 6 feet for that amenity zone, and then 2 foot for the side zone. And again, sidewalks on both sides of the street. Absolute have to have. For low density collectors, sidewalk minimum 6 foot. The amenity planting zone is 4 and the shy zone is 1. On all of our collectors, we expect sidewalks on both sides of the street just because they are kind of a busier part of the county where we're collecting trips, not only for drivers, but people who are walking and biking. They're the connectivity tissue to our kind of places people are going in the county. For our active area collectors, the minimum sidewalk width is 8 feet. The planting and amenity zone is 5. And then for the shy zone, it's 2. Sidewalks, again, both sides of the street. For our low density locals, the sidewalk minimum is 5, planting 4, and that's shy zones, the space before we want to see fences really kind of collapse in on the sidewalk or encroach into that space and make it feel more confined is 1. Similar to what's currently in the transportation plan, low density locals need a sidewalk on a minimum of one side of the street. The reason why I talked a little bit earlier about the local active areas that we're creating and we're expanding is we think there are a lot of places in the county where we have local streets that a sidewalk on one side of the street is not, it's not appropriate. There's so many parts of the county where we have local streets where we need two sidewalks. We need a sidewalk on the both side of the street. They need to be slightly wider. You do have a range here because there's such a range of land uses that we have included in this local active area. You know, for those areas that are in the sector plans, we're going to point people there. But this is our recognition that our local streets really are kind of the pedestrian, you know, tissue that connects people to places. One of the other things that we're looking at is even including kind of streets that connect to our schools in this active local. If you've got a school on it, you should have sidewalks on both sides of the street. We thought about doing a carve out, so we're working on integrating it. It's not there on the map I'm going to show yet. And then as we were talking through this as a team, we didn't know where to put Arlington Boulevard. It doesn't really fit in any of these, and we also don't want to try and tweak any of these to make them fit Arlington Boulevard. So we're giving it its own. It's a unique place in the county. It's a unique corridor. For Arlington Boulevard, our guidance is an 11-foot trail on both sides of the corridor. Where that exists, we want at least 4 feet of a buffer and a 2-foot shy zone. It's a little bit unique because Arlington Boulevard has a lot of service streets that then will fall under the local guidance. But this is kind of our recognition that we want to be able to say that for Arlington Boulevard, this is the minimum and really point to the expectation that we do want things in the future. And this can change over time if the land use vision changes for Arlington Boulevard over time, because a lot of what this does is respond to that contextualized vision, not just for transportation, but for how everything works together. So what I'm going to show next is a map that is not, you know, as detailed or as zoomable as you would like to see. But one thing that's not on here yet are those streets that are within 750 feet from a school entrance. Those will go onto this map as an active local, recognizing that we want slightly wider sidewalks because our schools are pedestrian generators. People are walking to them on a daily basis. And they're places we want sidewalks on both sides of the street. So that's why we're going to include them into the active locals. And then once we've kind of fine-tuned these streets, we are going to develop our curb lane hierarchies for them. We've talked about curb lane hierarchies before. They're going to talk about people access, goods access, parking, greening, public space activation, the importance of utilities within, you know, that area. But for today, I'm going to color code you through this. The red that you see are high density arterials. They make sense. They're the RB corridor, sections of Columbia Pike, Pentagon, and Crystal City. For our medium density arterials, Langston Boulevard, portions of Columbia Pike, portions of Washington Boulevard, portions of Wilson Boulevard, and then segments of George Mason, 4 Mile Run, South Walter Reed. I'm not listing every single street, examples. And then for our lower density arterials, portions of Glebe, portions of South Walter Reed, portions of George Mason, Old Dominion, portions of the county that you really think, yes, those are single family neighborhoods, those are lower density arterials. For the active area collectors, those are shown in a purple-ish color. You can see kind of a collection of them in Ballston, some of them in the Roslyn area. We've got them down in Pentagon and Crystal City. These are ones that, again, just they're active areas. We recognize that has a different streetscape feel than somewhere that's lower density. You can see those lower density collectors in this color here. It is segments like the light blue here for that Second Street, portions of Second Street, that really just kind of recognize that these lower density collectors a lot in North Arlington still want sidewalks on both sides of the street, but they're not, you know, places where we're expecting as generous a streetscape. And then finally, the active areas locals, you can see there's a lot of green. It's most of the RB corridor, but you can see other areas that maybe you're kind of like, why are those showing up as active area locals? They're the areas where we have a lot of garden apartments, a lot of townhouses. Those are neighborhoods where we want to reflect the fact that no, maybe they're not the commercial or active generators that you think of in the Roslyn corridor, even on Langston Boulevard or Columbia Pike. But when you have 16 plus units per acre, that's can be up to like 60 or 70 people per acre. That's a lot of people who are walking along these sidewalks, and we want to make sure that they're adequate and that there's sidewalks on both sides in these neighborhoods. And we really think that that's an important kind of like the biggest change that has happened between the previous transportation plans, street types, and today's. Yes, we've collapsed some of the arterials. We have collectors now, but it's really recognizing that our local streets in a lot of areas do need sidewalks on both sides of the street, that is an important part of the pedestrian connectivity within the county. So with that kind of ends my description of this map. And I'm gonna hand over to Chris to do our questions.
Sorry about that. My mouse went to sleep. Apparently didn't move it enough. All right. So I have gotten into a weird view of people. There we go. Now I can see who's raised their hand. So we'll start with Aaron. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. I like a lot of the things here. I'm trying to wrap my head around a few things. Going backwards to the list here, the local low density. I'm looking at neighborhoods that I know. It makes sense that there's not many houses there versus active local, but the active locals walk through the low density locals to get to the buses, to get to the metro, to get to their cars sometimes. So I'm not sure an isolated little green pocket where everybody's moving about and then nobody steps outside of that is really accurate. So I think we should be looking at the routes that they're taking, not just the houses that are there. Washington Boulevard, you went from 8 types down to 3 in that segment you were showing. Is that right?
4.
4. So the interstate part of Washington Boulevard is a 4th color or 5th color?
So it changes 4 times between Glebe and Route 50.
Okay.
So it goes from medium to high to medium. I can't pull it up on this map as well. It's even smaller for me presenting.
I see it. I'm just looking at Clarendon going south. We're going red, high to medium to low. We cross Route 50, and then we're into the interstate portion that you don't deal with. Okay. Right. Sure, that's fine. So that's going to change. That's just going to be some guidance on, hey, maybe the sidewalks along there again should be more consistent. Are we again thinking about traveling along there, or are we just thinking about because of the buildings there that the sidewalk should be different?
So in general, the sidewalks minimum are 6, and right now some of the minimums are 5. So it just moves all around. What we're saying is like you won't experience such change. We've also stripped some things out that used to be in the old street type recommendations that we just don't think are places you look for guidance within the street types, like travel speeds. Those are safety issues. Those are handled by safety corridor studies. Median guidance, whether or not transit is present or whether or not bike lanes are present, that's all covered by our mobility networks now, our priority networks. So the streetscape guidance, the typology guidance is really guiding the streetscape in relation to the roadway classification or the street classification. So they go hand in hand.
Yeah. Okay. So I know this development only happens when it's time to develop and fix things, but looking at Washington Boulevard, this is near where I live, looking at Washington Boulevard on the closer to Route 50 side, but then also looking at Route 50, where we don't have the desired 11-foot trail on both sides. We don't have the clear buffer in there. Does that mean in the ideal world, you guys will look at Route 50 and Washington Boulevard and narrow it, the automobile space to allow for safe pedestrian space? Or are we just like, we'd like it to be better, but it's not, so it's not?
This is guidance for if and when corridor studies are done or an analysis in the future. This helps us understand the future that we're working towards to provide guidance on how we prioritize the space. I'm not going to
So
come
we
out
don't,
and say that we're doing anything specifically on a
oh,
corridor, but this helps
okay.
give us that context of like, these are the ideals that we're looking for. Do the analysis and figure it out.
Okay. I'm just trying to see if the study was done and we look at it and say, okay, it should be, we've got some places, I think they're really 4-foot sidewalks on Washington Boulevard with signposts and stuff in the middle of them. Does that mean we lose parking? Does that mean we narrow the travel lanes if the study is done?
A little bit of all of that, right? So the curb lane hierarchy says pedestrians are the first priority. If we have those type of sidewalks on Washington Boulevard, if and when we do a corridor study, if and when
Sure.
it becomes the priority for a corridor to think about how that right of way is allocated, the sidewalks that exist with those impediments in the way don't meet our definition of pedestrian priority on an arterial. So the first place we would start is, okay, what do we do to make these sidewalks work better for pedestrians? Where is that space coming from? I would say there's
Excellent.
also a very wide median on Washington Boulevard by 50.
Yeah. Last thing, part of the NCSC, I have a list of a couple hundred problematic sidewalk areas or missing sidewalk areas. So when you've got the money, I got your list. Just let me know. Thanks a lot.
Pam, you're up next.
Hi, and I live on one of those blocks that has no sidewalks on either side, and I think we're in a high priority area, which is intriguing. I I love sidewalk lists. I really care about them deeply. I'd like to know more about what are the criteria for active area local versus low density local? Because the difference in the sidewalk list is huge. I mean, a 5-foot width sidewalk is really very narrow unless you only have one person on it. You have two people or people with dogs and stuff, it doesn't work at all.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer how we came up with that?
Yeah, and I'd like to see it written out too, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes,
just
please.
just quickly. So we looked at the GLUP and we used basically anything that was beyond the single family home housing designation. So that changes at low to medium. Basically, it's the 16 unit per acre breakpoint. So anything that's designated as single family homes only was low density. And then anything that went above that single family home designation is an active area local with that fluctuation in guidance. I will say there's probably going to be some people that have some palpitations about the number of sidewalks and street segments that are now in our active locals that we're saying sidewalks on both sides of the street are important. But that's really kind of the designator of the differentiation is the density and the ability of just how many people live on that street.
So, for example, the block I live, most of it is single family homes, but there are a couple buildings that have maybe 3 or 4 units. And is that why it would be, we're also fairly close to the community center and parks and everything within a couple
So
blocks.
it's all based off of the density on the block you live on. And then also schools will get layered into this. One thing that we do want to be respectful is not create too many active area locals because there is kind of a balance of how many that we say there are. This is an extreme change in the guidance that exists today. And we're trying to make sure that we're finding the sweet spot of the kind of tie back to the land uses that exist. And that's that 16 plus units per acre.
This is going to be interesting. Thank you.
And just to clarify, Kristen, that's the allowed units per
Right.
acre. That may not
Right.
be how many units per acre exist on that street today.
Right. Because typologies are forward facing.
Yeah, it's all based on, Krista mentioned the GLUP. It's the general land use plan that identifies the planned land uses. But as Chris said, yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's been implemented. But I can drop a link to that into the chat just so everyone can see that as well.
Great. Anybody else have any questions on the street typologies? All right, onward.
So just a quick hit of next steps. We are still working towards a draft plan release. Hopefully sometime by the end of June. When that is released, there will be a minimum of 5 weeks of public comment for review. We will schedule an advisory group meeting in advance of that draft plan release. Everything is still just a little in works, so we don't want to get something on the books yet if we're not quite ready. We don't want to move people's calendars around too often, but we hope to have a little bit more clarity on that in the next few weeks. So that should be going on your calendars sooner than later. And yeah, that will be kind of, we'll preview the totality of the plan for you and everything that we've talked about. Obviously, it won't be the draft document that will be shared publicly. But we're really excited about it. A lot of these pieces are coming together and we're really seeing how this plan is going to work for us moving forward. Lots of great pieces of guidance that have been integrated based off of what we've heard in these meetings and what we've kind of had to think about and how we process it, and the questions you have are questions people in the public are going to have as they look at this plan and think about how it impacts their daily lives from a transportation perspective, or kind of that conversation about the active area locals, like what does sidewalks on both sides of the street in neighborhoods where we have said maybe that's not important before mean to people. And then we're still hoping for board consideration sometime this fall. So that's the end of the presentation and kind of where we are today. And we're going to have a lot more to share in the coming weeks to the next 6 weeks.
All right. Well, I have not seen anybody put their name in via the chat for public comment, but if folks would like to, you can go ahead and do that now. It's exciting to be coming up before we know it on the draft plan, which will put a whole bunch of what we've talked about into a cohesive whole. But Kristen, could you talk just briefly about, I know there are a couple things that will be in that draft plan that we haven't really talked about in depth yet. Can you just flag what those are for people?
So we alluded to the fact that the draft plan is going to have strategies in support of the modal priority networks. A lot of those are things that we heard through kind of the process, and even some of the strategies that you guys had in support of different policies or policies that you'd recommended that, they were modally specific. It's all making sure that people understand what those priority networks are and kind of some more specific modal nuance to how we think those get implemented, or how we think about them in implementation. One thing that will be in there that we haven't previewed, it's really not any new guidance. We're making sure those areas that are planned for new streets on the current MTP stay as guidance. So that's going to be a map that's going to be in the draft plan document, but we haven't shared because it's not really new guidance. It's just the main carrying forward of guidance that we think is important to not lose. I alluded to the section call out on transportation and development. Again, not a lot of new guidance, but kind of we've deconflicted a lot of locations within the current 6 modal elements that sometimes don't always align well into one spot where you're like, oh, this is, what we expect from the streetscape, or this is what we expect from curb lane management when we think about development, or this is what, pedestrian access on a site, like how we should be prioritizing things. And then a little bit of guidance on just like how all this comes together, right? So a lot of the things that we verbalized within presentations about how it all builds, there'll be that section at the end that speaks to what does this all mean? How does it all work together? Where do we go from here? And there will be a few, like Allison was talking about, general actions to look at pieces that are important to near term like realization of the plan. One thing that we've been working with on zoning is they reference the street classifications. One of the actions will have to be that they need to take a look at all of the zoning code and make sure that it's compliant, or not compliant, but like it works with the new classifications that this plan will create. And then there'll be a nod to kind of corridors of importance moving forward. So like a dozen corridors that base off of all of the conversations that we have in this plan, where we know there's conflicts, where we know that we still need to realize the modal priority networks, are locations that we think are more important within the first 5 years of this plan to start studying and thinking about. Allison, Brian, did I miss anything?
No, I think that about sums it up.
And the curb lane hierarchies. Sorry, I didn't verbalize it here, but I've mentioned it a number of times in the presentation.
I was going to ask if I missed that when it went by. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that is all that we've got for this evening. I don't see any other hands, and I've not seen anything go by for public comment. So I think, oh, go ahead, Pam.
Hi. So we don't have any formal homework?
No, because you guys are going to have a big, big homework or assignment piece coming out of the next meeting.
Not till
Y'all
the
are
end of
good.
June.
Yeah.
Okay. And in the case of the PAC, we had lots of comments that I didn't get to about the strategies. Should I send them to you?
So we're not planning on doing a lot more refinement on these strategies right now. We're kind of in a state of staff refinement. If you want to share them, we're not going to tell you not to, but we're not in a, continue to do significant changes. If there's a few that are really important to you that we think about, I would say send those over so they kind of rise to the top for us to flag through the process.
Okay.
But the homework after next meeting will be full
Yes.
written comments on the entire draft plan. So.
Right, right. And we'll have a significant amount of time to do that, I hope.
At least 5 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. But at the same time as the public engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And yep.
That helps. Thank you.
And Kaylee?
Yeah, apologies. I had to hop on late, so you might have answered this question. But first of all, thank you so much for all your hard work on this. I am just very interested in kind of the intersection of kind of all of Arlington's boards and how they all work together. Would really kind of love to get your perspective on, you've talked about kind of the barriers that you're building in to make these like safer for pedestrians. I'm curious, like from the vantage point of like, who's planting trees or like how do we make that beautiful? I'm curious like who handles that piece of it, because it sounds like it'd be a different piece of the puzzle than what you're tackling here.
So that's our parks department handles street plantings, and all of that is guided by the FNRC, sorry, not the Forest and Natural Resource Plan. So there's a whole section. So in the policy that relates to biophilia, we're going to have a cross-reference to the plan guidance that exists within those other comprehensive elements that speaks to those components, because we don't need to replan it. That plan exists, that guidance exists. We're going to point you to that complementary guidance that exists within another plan document if you want to do a deeper dive.
Very cool. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, great. Well, thank you everyone for the great discussion and the excellent questions. And thank you to staff for some excellent work getting us to this point. And we'll all meet back up with a draft plan to dig into.
Yeah, we're excited.
Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.